Our story starts at a campsite. The protagonist wakes up to a commotion when someone points out there's something in his boot. Annoyed by the noise, he thinks to himself that all he wanted was a moment of silence. That's when he introduces himself. His name is Encrid. After causing a scene at the camp, Encrid is demoted and assigned to lead the so-called Idiot Squad. Soon after, the narrative jumps to a battlefield where a bloody fight breaks out. Amidst the chaos, Encrid reflects on himself. He has no special powers, no extraordinary gifts. Everything he has was earned through sheer effort and relentless training. Still, as the battle intensifies, a dark thought consumes him, the certainty that this would be his end, and that he would never achieve his dream of becoming a knight. He gets stabbed in the neck and dies. However, his death wouldn't be peaceful. After a brief encounter with a mysterious figure, Encrid wakes up abruptly, wondering if it had all been just a dream. But to his shock, the events start repeating. The battle happens again. He dies again, and again. On the fourth loop, Encrid finally understands. It wasn't a dream. The day was repeating itself, and he was trapped in it. Suddenly, a knight drives forward with a perfect thrust. Our hero is caught off guard by the attack. He closes his eyes. It is the 17th time he has seen that blade tip coming. The sword drives through his chest and out his back. It is his 17th death. He spits blood and drops to his knees. The knight who struck him walks away without looking back. Our hero thinks about what would have happened if he had pushed harder. The sounds of war and clashing swords all around him. Mr. Rob on the ground, lying in a pool of blood. The surroundings shift without warning. A lantern appears with a blue flame. A mysterious voice says, "Do you really believe that?" Our hero flat on the ground with a broken expression. Suddenly, a mysterious creature appears in a boat. It holds a lantern between its hands. Our hero tries to get up. The creature whispers into his ear, "Try to fight." Rob stays on his knees, full of regret. He feels rage rising. His teeth grind together. Suddenly, the sound of pots and pans echoes around him. Rob wakes up and thinks, "I lost again." A soldier from his squadron whispers something into his ear. He ignores the whisper. Our hero tells the soldier to look at his boot. Suddenly, an insect crawls out of the soldier's boot. He flinches and stomps on it. Mr. Rob turns away and ignores the soldier. After all, it was the 18th time he had come across that same insect. He pulls back the curtain without looking behind him. That kind of resolve did not start today. The sound of a sword hitting the ground and Rob breathing hard, a mercenary down on the ground. He says, "Someday you could become a knight." Rob is struck by what the mercenary just said. He begins to dream of becoming a knight. From behind, a knight stands in a burning environment. He raises a banner against the backdrop of war. Our hero laughs and declares himself the knight of the end. Drunken laughter fills a bar. One of them turns and mocks Rob's dream to his face. Rob listens and keeps wrapping the bandage around his arms. He looks forward and decides he will not give up. He walks out of the bar and cuts the air with his sword. Robin keeps training day after day, split a straw dummy clean in two, raised his sword with teeth grinding, drove the blade into the head of a massive monster. He drops the sword and plants his foot on top of the monster. He shouts, "I am getting stronger." Suddenly, a frontal attack. The sword slips from his hands. Another blade drives through his gut. His sword hits the ground. It was just a kid who had beaten him with a single blow. He falls to the ground holding his stomach with both hands. The kid turns his back and walks away. On his knees, Mr. Rob imagines that everything he put in was for nothing. He stares at the ground with disgust. The sun reflects the effort of every blow. He shouts up at the sky and strikes the tree with a diagonal cut. He stops and lowers his sword. Robin, exhausted, rests the sword between his legs. The sun reflects again between the mountains. He looks back at the tree. The tree stares back. He stands there staring at the tree for 2 full minutes. Our hero returns to his attack stance. He raises the sword behind his shoulder, throws a fast horizontal cut. He stares the tree down with contempt, grinds his teeth in frustration, and shouts one more time for the same reason, and finishes with one last diagonal strike. The wind beats against the banner. Rob closes his eyes and walks at the front of his squadron. He turns to Jackson and calls him over. Jackson looks at him and asks what it is. Robin orders Jackson to carry out his morning rotation. He looks back with mild disinterest, sighs and goes to carry out the order. Rem is offended by what he just watched beside Rob. Rob calls him over and Rem looks over thinking he is next in line for orders. Our hero looks at Rem and says, "Heart of the beast, I want to learn it again." Rem looks at our hero mildly surprised. He lets out a faint smile and agrees with the idea. The sun reflects in the sky and the clouds drift past in calm. A knight drives his sword into our hero. Mr. Rob slips a fast horizontal attack. The scene returns to the sword in his chest. Our hero stares down the knight with a look full of rage. Several soldiers looking toward the horizon. All of them shout with determination and raise their swords. One of them shouts alone. A lancer closes in on our hero while he is unprepared. The spear rushes toward his head. Rob throws his neck back and slips the attack. He blocks the next strike with his shield, lets out a quiet breath of relief. The other soldiers attack with full determination. A beam of light appears behind one of the soldiers. An arrow cuts toward his back at speed. Rob gets there and deflects the arrow with his shield. A soldier advances with a downward strike. Rob takes the soldier's head off clean. He spins around and looks startled. A knight drives his sword into the chest of one of his soldiers. The knight pulls the sword out slowly. He raises the sword behind his shoulder. He looks forward with bloodthirsty eyes, walks slowly in Rob's direction. Rob just watches him close the distance. He raises his sword and locks in on the knight. The knight advances with a grin of pure insanity. Rem launches his hatchet into the air, catches it mid-flight and holds it firm, and already moves toward Rob's neck. Our hero does not dodge, just freezes in shock. Rem says not to let himself get rattled so easily. Rob looks at Rem with surprise. Rem looks back with a hard and intimidating stare. The knight drives forward with a frontal strike. Rob watches the attack closing in. The sword rushes straight toward Rob's head. He locks eyes with the knight again. The knight attacks with a bloodthirsty grin. Our hero barely slips it by twisting his neck away. His heart pounds from the sheer force of that charge. The knight is surprised by Rob's dodge. Rob turns slowly to face forward. The knight watches with a look of disbelief. Our hero raises his sword and grinds his teeth. The knight lines up a frontal strike at Rob's neck. Our hero shouts with everything he has. He looks at the attack with wide eyes. The knight pulls the sword back from his neck. Rob grinds his teeth at having failed again. An oar cuts a small whirlpool through the water. The creature appears again in front of Rob. It whispers to Rob, "Acknowledge your weakness." Our hero on his knees again. He refuses to acknowledge his weakness. Soldiers clash as chaos spreads through the battlefield. Rob staggers under the weight of the knight's heavy strike. The blade grazes clean across his neck. Our hero cannot believe that speed. He drops to his knees, completely beaten. Just as our hero is about to hit the ground, the pendant slips slowly from his neck. The metal rings out as it falls between the dust and the blood. The scene shifts to Robin sitting beside a tree. Creature parts scattered across the ground all around him. Mr. Robin pushes himself up with both hands on his sword. He turns his back on the creatures and walks away, does not look back for even a second. Halfway down the road, an old woman stops him. She holds out her only amulet as payment for what he had done. It was her way of thanking him for saving her entire village. Rob stops and studies the amulet with close attention. The woman says this amulet will grant whatever he desires. He says nothing, just listens with a closed expression. Our hero then watches the amulet drop to the ground. He picks it up slowly and holds it between his fingers. Rob tries to get back up as a knight closes in to finish him. The knight raises his sword with Rob completely defenseless below. He stares the knight down with everything he has left. His enemy stares back with cold and steady eyes. The knight lets out a faint smile as he lines up the final blow, then suddenly drives the sword straight down toward Rob's throat. The sound of pots and pans rings out through the whole area. Our hero snaps awake and is on his feet. Rem jolts back violently at the sight of an insect. He is furious, convinced Rob had planted it there. And once again, our hero turns away without paying attention. Rob stops and firmly tells Rem to stop his whining. He looks at Rem and asks him to teach him the heart of the beast. The shaggy one looks back at Rob with distrust in his eyes. The scene shifts to the sun blazing across an open sky. Rem loads up a fast attack with both hatchets in hand. Our hero is caught off guard by the shaggy one's brutal speed. He barely slips the attack at the very last second. Rem is surprised. Something about Rob's confidence was different this time. He stops and asks what our hero has been doing differently, asks what he has been doing to toughen the skin of his heart. Rob calmly answers that he has just been training like always. The shaggy one turns away and mutters under his breath. He murmurs that maybe the skin just got a little thicker, then picks up the sword that was leaning against the rock. He opens his combat stance and challenges Rob to a sword fight. The shaggy one looks at him, mildly impressed by what he heard. He lets out a fired-up smile before settling into position. Suddenly, a fast horizontal strike comes from the shaggy one. Rob slips it by a hair in that first moment. He keeps chaining a series of dodges one after another. Rem wonders internally how long Rob is going to keep just dodging. The shaggy one throws a horizontal strike directly at Rob's neck. He dodges once more with pinpoint precision. The blow grazes right across the front of his face. Rob thinks that the only skill he had was mercenary Valen's technique. It was a sword technique that many people openly talked down about. They called it nothing more than a cheap and worthless trick. Rem mocks the weakness of Rob's lower body with sharp irony. Rob lifts his stance again without saying a word. He positions the sword well behind his right shoulder. The shaggy one anticipates for a moment, already excited for the next move. Rob thinks back to the knight who had beaten him so many times. He recalls the exact angle and weight of that fatal strike. He charges forward with everything he has in a full frontal attack. The shaggy one lands a perfect parry directly on the strike. The sword bounced off the hatchet and flew far away. Rob realizes what he just did in that moment. He had imitated the exact same thrust of that bastard knight. His body remembered every single defeat it had taken from that same blow. He had died more than 10 times to that exact thrust. The shaggy one processes the short exchange in silence and admits that strike was one of the cleaner ones Rob had ever thrown. Rob says that with a strike like that, Rem's hand should have bled. Rem agrees without breaking eye contact. Our hero realizes that in a real fight, he could not afford to fail like that. The shaggy one says yes, you need full confidence behind that strike, because without it, Rob would lose his grip on the sword. Rob takes in everything that was said in complete silence. Even though the shaggy one had explained it poorly, he understood the point. He noticed the difference between his thrust and the bastard knight's. The knight carried full confidence in his sword and in every single strike. Rob had none of that confidence in himself yet. And once again, the knight lifts the cold tip of his sword and finishes him with one more clean stroke of mercy. Rob repeats the thrust, but this time with real intent behind it. And once again, the sword hangs suspended in the air before him. He recalls how that bastard always held his gaze steady. That strike that went straight for the neck without a moment of hesitation. Rem blocks the attack with just one hand without effort. Like that bastard who was always one step ahead of everything. Who once again showed his mercy strike like it was nothing at all. On the 3rd day, the sword drives through Robin's throat one more time. On the 10th day, he tries again with the same result. On the 50th day, the strike begins to take some shape. But something was still missing at the center of that movement. On the 123rd day, one more stroke of mercy, and the bastard advances with his confident strike just like always. When the 124th day finally came, he advances on Rem with a different kind of confidence. The shaggy one is surprised. This time it was clearly different. Rob was well postured, grounded, and centered this time. Rem looks him in the eyes and calls him crazy for trying. His hands were completely torn up and bleeding. The blood starts pouring from between his fingers, but Rob does not stop laughing for even a second, because he had finally mastered the bastard's thrust. Rob charges forward screaming with everything he has. The bastard is caught off guard by the speed of the attack. He stretches his arm out and drives forward with a firm thrust. The blade connects directly with the knight's helmet. Both strikes meet, and the bastard catches him across the neck. Our hero's first real attempt ends in failure. He decides he will not blink this time. He grips the sword tight. He will not let go. Rob hits the ground, and the bastard plants his boot on his chest and repeats the same mercy line one more time. He lifts the sword slowly to drive it into Rob's neck. Rob mutters something that makes the knight stop cold. He tells the knight that tomorrow he will not win this fight. The bastard lets out a faint smile and answers back, says the dead do not have a tomorrow, and finishes him with one more stroke of mercy. The scene shifts and the amulet catches the light again. Suddenly the buzz of a mosquito in the air, cut short right away by a hard stomp on the ground. And once again, Rob turns his back on Rem. The shaggy one thanks him for stepping on the insect, but then pauses. Rob had given the order way too casually. Rob calls the wide-eyed one over to get him armor, a shield, and a dagger. The wide-eyed one says he will only do it because Rob is the chief. Makes it clear he does not take orders from anyone. The redhead throws in a quick jab calling Robin lazy. Everyone is ready and Rem picks up on something different in our hero. This time Robin was moving with a sharp and heavy confidence. Suddenly a brutal thrust straight into the tree. Our hero shouts that every time he dies he feels the pain. The image of the bastard flares up hard in his mind. The scene shifts and Robin is staring down at the ground. He says out loud that this time he has to push past himself. Then suddenly the knight appears walking across the surface of the water, and our hero drops into his fighting stance. The scene cuts again to a thrust into the tree. He strikes and punches a deep hole into the wood, strikes again with that same exact thrust. This time he drives straight through the tree from top to bottom. Our hero gets himself ready for battle. He pulls on his boots without rushing, stands up and locks the shield onto his arm, and says out loud that he has to keep moving forward. Several soldiers lift war horns and blast them hard. The whole squadron lines up tight in formation. The battle kicks off and the sound of war tears open. A soldier charges at Rob with a downward strike. He spots the opening and drives his shield straight into the enemy's chest. Another soldier comes from behind swinging a spiked mace. Robin spins around and puts him down with a clean rotating strike. He fixes his eyes on the next soldier already winding up, catches the blow with the point of his knee, and immediately crushes the soldier's head with the shield. An axe comes flying at him ready to split his skull. He dodges fast enough and snatches the axe right out of the air, then hurls it straight into the soldier's head. He clocks that Vel is right behind his back and shields him from the arrow that would have killed him. Vel is shaken by the raw brutality of Rob, who takes a soldier's head off with a single strike. And there it was again, that same wall he always ran into. The bastard's eyes burning with pure insanity right in front of him. This time, Robin's eyes burned back with pure confidence. The two of them lock stares for one tense moment. The knight steps in with a heavy horizontal swing. The blow lands hard, but Rob does not flinch. He pushes forward even as his shield shatters, and blocks the knight's next attack at the last second. The bastard realizes he is being played. Rob drives his forehead directly into the knight's chest. His boots drag through the sand from the force of it. He uses the sand and throws a fistful into the bastard's face, then screams as he loads up a full vertical strike. But of course, the knight was never going to hesitate. He comes forward with that same thrust as always. This time, our hero actually slips the strike. He stumbles for just a moment, and the bastard resets his position. The knight pivots and unleashes a brutal thrust. Rob just watches the speed with which he turned, but this time he knew exactly what he had to do. Both swords close in on each other fast. Then one of the blades snaps clean in half. An archer draws his bow at the back of the battle. The arrow cuts through the air for several meters. The bastard freezes. His sword was broken. Robin had finally won the battle, but the arrow the archer had loosed was still coming. The axe spins through the air straight toward the arrow and cuts its path short, splitting it clean in two. This time it is the bastard taking the thrust to the neck. Rem curses the coward archer with every drop of rage he has. The tip of Robin's sword pushes through the bastard's neck. Blood pours hard from the wound. The war still rages on all around them. The knight is down on his knees before our hero, and the roar of battle keeps echoing from every direction. Rob breathes deep with the feeling of having actually done it. He looks down at the bastard one more time, finds him on his knees bleeding out into the dirt. Robin raises his sword slowly with both hands and repeats the line the bastard always said, "This is mercy." Our hero swings and the knight's head flies through the sky. He takes in the bitter and earned taste of victory. He had finally broken through the walls that had always held him back. Then a brutal kick explodes into his back out of nowhere. Robin rolls across the ground from the impact of the mysterious creature and screams in pain through clenched teeth. The redhead and Rem are stunned by what just appeared, a creature built far beyond any normal physical size. Rem stares at it and names it Frog. The creature that kicked him is right behind Rob. Frog had kicked him for killing one of his best soldiers. The bastard is on his knees on the ground, defeated. Our hero picks up the teeth knocked from his mouth. Frog raises the axe high above his head, and it comes down with terrifying speed. Then Rem lands a parry and counters Frog clean, and follows through with a sharp horizontal strike. Frog blocks the blow with both hands. The shaggy one presses forward with teeth grinding. Frog charges back with the same brutal speed. A sequence of blows erupts between the two. Suddenly a soldier rushes in to drive a spear into Rob. The redhead appears and cuts him down just in time. From the impact, the shaggy one flies backward. Frog gets pushed back from the clash as well. Both of them reset and lock eyes in silence. The shaggy one lets out a faint smirk at Frog. Frog fires back, calls the commander weak and worthless. Rem says he will have to burn this coward down with magic. Frog asks what someone like Rob is doing in this war. Rem answers that he is here to kill him and drops into stance. Frog pauses for a moment, says this battle is not worth his time. He holds the shaggy one's gaze one last time and turns his back and walks away. The shaggy one calls him a coward. Suddenly someone sprints across the open battlefield. The redhead pushes forward with Robin on his back. The shaggy one covers them with a fast strike. Another soldier moves in to hit Robin and the redhead from behind. The ponytail steps in and blocks it at the last second. The blondie cuts down the soldier in front of the redhead and Robin. All three line up in front of Rob and the redhead ready. Our hero carries a quiet look of sadness on the redhead's shoulder. The soldiers raise the flag and call the retreat. Rob feels the weight lift and closes his eyes. The soldiers run screaming toward the horizon. The scene shifts and a single drop falls. Rob lies still as the mysterious voice fills the air around him. It says it is impressed he survived another day. It says he will not last against the walls still coming, and that his fate is to break down and give up. Rob tries to get up and answers, "Fate?" The bastard appears behind him, kneeling and defeated. When Robin rises, he says the walls exist for a reason, for him to break through himself. The creature laughs and says it cannot wait to see that. Everything returns to normal, and Encrid stares up at the ceiling. Our hero realizes where he is lying and looks to the side. He finds the shaggy one sitting right there beside him. The shaggy one says Robin has not slept properly in 2 days. He explains it was him who pulled Rob out from under Frog. Rem says the bones held up fine, but the head took a real hit, then immediately launches into a speech about being best friends forever. Our hero says they were never friends, and calls him the Noble Hunter. Rem reaches over and shoves his hand against Robin's mouth. Silence fills the room while everyone around them sleeps. Rem explodes at the shaggy one. That secret was not his to share. A new day starts, and the sky reflects the clouds. The guy in red starts hounding Rob for payment. Tag demands to know how much he spent putting Encred in there. He cannot understand how a common soldier got into the infirmary. Rob pokes at Tag, saying he was nowhere to be found during the battle. Tag grins and offers a special deal. Rob only has to pay double. The sky dims toward evening. The redhead walks into the cabin and stares at Robin. Robin is stretched out on the bed, relaxed. Suddenly, the redhead tosses something onto our hero's lap. He tells him to use it twice a day. It was an ointment Jackson always kept on hand. The ponytail wakes up with tears running down his face. He keeps crying while Rob just listens. Robin tells him to get out. He is not dead. Night falls. Our hero starts to drift into his thoughts. He wonders why everyone around him is so worried. Ragnar suddenly appears from behind the curtain. The two of them hold each other's gaze for a brief moment. Rob asks what the commander is doing in the infirmary. Ragnar turns away and goes back to eating his apple. It was clear he did not care even a little. Morning comes and Robin is in the infirmary with two soldiers. One was a commander who was always picking fights with Encred. The other was just a soldier staring blankly at nothing. He looked like a low-ranking soldier with nowhere to be. A noise breaks out and Robin snaps his eyes to the left. The other two in the room look over as well. A woman with long braided hair walks into the cabin. Her ears were different from everyone else's. She carried a strange sword at her hip. The woman wore full armor with a helmet tucked under her arm. She walks in asking who commands the 444th Squadron. Our hero watches her with a sharp and curious look. The room goes silent, and everyone stares at her. The commander in the room quietly wonders if she is a fairy. She turns the question back, asks which group he belongs to. He answers that he is from Vengeance. The woman fixes her eyes on him for asking that. You do not go around announcing someone else's race. Robin watches her, impressed, and reads her as a superior. He steps forward and introduces himself as the 444th Squadron commander. She gives a small compliment, says he has been leading his members well, then turns to leave. That was all she came to say. Suddenly, she stops mid-step and asks for the name of the soldier standing there staring at nothing. He gets nervous and stammers a name, Krang. Rob catches it immediately. That name was just invented on the spot. The elf woman glances back for one brief, calculated moment, then continues forward without another word. Our hero stays quiet and watches her go. Suddenly, the sun begins to rise behind a mountain. Encred opens and closes his fist. He wonders if he should start training now. The commander in the back asks where he plans to do that. He turns his back on the commander without answering. The blondie goes back to staring forward. Encred raises his sword and it catches the sunlight. He resets his footing and opens his combat stance. He thinks back to the last thrust he threw in battle, then closes his eyes and starts to focus. He pictures just how lethal a strike from the shaggy one would be. Suddenly, someone walks up and starts talking to him. It was that strange blondie again showing up uninvited. Our hero says he was trying to replicate the fight against the bastard. The blondie asks why he was doing that, and makes Rob question why he was actually doing it at all. Our hero looks back with a small flicker of doubt in his eyes. He turns forward and sits with the thought for a moment. He lowers the sword, then raises it again, and answers that he wants to become a knight. The blondie looks mildly surprised by the answer. Robin looks back at him and says it was the first time someone had not laughed at his dream. Krang says he simply forgot to laugh this time. He says something came back to him after watching Rob train. Our hero watches him disappear into the trees. Krang calls back. If he ever becomes a knight, remember the name. After dawn, the scene shifts to a man playing a harp. The commander will not stop complaining about the late coffee. The redhead asks how Encred's wound is holding up. He says the ointment worked well and thanks him for it. Jackson says if he is already good, he can return to battle. The scene shifts to a candle and a cup on a table. The blondie says goodnight to our hero. Encred rolls over, lies down, and says goodnight back. The commander keeps complaining, even lying in bed. Encred realizes he let the whole day pass doing nothing. He wakes up to shouting coming from outside the barracks. The commander is at it again, yelling about the late food. Rob realizes he has heard all of this before. Maybe he has been caught in a loop. He steps outside, and the redhead says that same line as before. Encred breaks into a cold sweat and responds to the redhead carefully. The redhead just says he should return to battle like before. Our hero was completely overtaken by fear in that moment. Suddenly, the creature speaks. Another wall is coming to stop him. He realizes then that he died in his sleep again, and once again a new wall stands right in front of him. He feels an unexplainable surge of resolve rising from within. The night sky glitters with stars overhead. The scene returns to the candle and the cup on the table. Robin is already lying down thinking about who could have killed him. He thinks the killer might be right there among them. The only image that keeps coming to him is the fairy. The fear takes over his body before he can stop it. The fairy begins moving through the forest. He recalls the reason she came to the cabin in the first place. He looks toward the entrance of the cabin. and decides to wait there for the assassin. Suddenly, a dart drives into his neck. He starts thrashing on the bed and falls off, unable to move at all. It was a powerful, paralytic poison working fast. The commander had already been gone from the cabin for a while. The assassin closes in on Krang. Encrid tries to drag himself across the floor to intervene. The assassin raises the sword over Krang. The scene cuts to Krang taking a blade to the chest. He starts going pale as blood spills from his mouth. Our hero grinds his teeth with pure rage. Suddenly, a sword tears through the wall of the cabin from outside, and another hooded figure in red appears in that same instant. Encrid is already flat on the ground, completely paralyzed. He notices the figure carries the exact same traits as the elf woman. It was literally the same sword she always carried. Encrid thinks, maybe it really is her after all. And then he wakes up, back to the same damned routine. The same madman playing that harp without stopping. Rob sits quietly thinking about what happened the day before. He was not fast enough to catch the assassin's presence in time. This would not be easy. He was not only up against the fairy. Our hero starts to feel powerless against the size of this challenge. He thinks back to the days of that brutal war, that bastard who looked completely unbeatable, and yet he managed to bring him down. That alone gave him enough confidence to believe a way existed. Suddenly, he yanks the commander's blanket back to check underneath. Nobody was hiding there, so he decides to stay sharp and watch what happens outside. The commander kept mocking him, something about low-ranking soldiers, laying the sarcasm on thick as usual. Rob fires back, saying he had no idea the commander cared that much. He turns and tells the commander he was also being sarcastic. The blondie notices and asks with a smile if he should come back later. Our hero tells him it is fine and waves him in. He watches Krang with a quiet suspicion behind his eyes. It made no sense that the assassins would target someone like him. He had to be carrying some kind of importance that was not obvious yet. Back in the squadron cabin, everyone is lounging around doing nothing. The scene cuts to Encrid asking directly who Krang actually is. The blondie looks thrown off by the unexpected question. Our hero is still waiting for a real answer. Krang hesitates and asks, "Who am I?" The commander props himself up a little to listen in. The blondie says it is a long story, and that Rob should not know about it. Rob stays quiet and just stares at him. He lets it go and agrees with the blondie without pushing. The commander gets furious that he just accepted that answer. He points at Krang and calls him a spy flat out. The blondie shifts his eyes to the commander in a different way. The commander starts feeling the weight of that stare. Krang steps toward the commander and the two of them lock eyes. He says he has never betrayed and will never betray the kingdom. Rob believes every word. He could see it clearly in those eyes. The blondie carried the unmistakable presence of a true noble knight. The commander kept grumbling that he should not be speaking like that, but Robin could see he was no knight. He had been useless the day before. Even so, he was clearly hiding something beneath the surface. The scene returns to the candle and the cup on the table. Rob says goodnight to the commander and to Krang. He notices the commander seems calmer tonight, probably because of Krang. He snaps his eyes quickly toward the outside of the cabin, then gets up slowly and grips his sword. The commander notices and asks what he is doing. Our hero is not about to give his plan away. The commander watches him for a moment without understanding, and goes back to sleep figuring Encrid had knocked his head too hard. Meanwhile, the blondie sleeps easy in his bed without a care. Exactly what Rob expected from those two. Then suddenly, our hero jolts from a sharp shock. The dart from before grazes right past his neck. The strike tears a massive hole through the side of the cabin. He scrambles to get into position and reach his sword, but the assassin had already finished off the commander and wrapped it up with Krang right after. He realizes with a hollow feeling that everyone had fallen again. Our hero wakes up to the same harp sound as always. This time he tries to warn the higher-ups about what is coming, but fails completely. Nobody believes a word he says. He looks out from the cabin, tries to stay as sharp as he possibly can. He shouts out that the assassins are already here, but it was already too late. They had landed their mark. He only catches a glimpse of the assassins slipping away into the dark. The next night, he accepts that no one will help him here. Someone launches the dart with just 2 fingers and catches him clean in the neck before he can react. He moves to the next attempt and stands ready searching for the assassin. And once again, the attack comes from nowhere. The assassin turns and walks away without a trace. The scene shifts back to the same morning routine. He holds tight to his sword with rage burning inside. It was the 20th time he had died without doing a single thing. He stares at the floor and then suddenly lets out a laugh, then steps out and starts thinking hard about how to stop the dart. He walks toward the redhead with slow and steady steps. Jackson was cleaning his dagger with quiet focus. Our hero wonders why Jackson never fights his enemies face to face. The shaggy one answers, because he is a filthy creep, the redhead striking knights from behind with precision. Jackson asks if Rob's wounds are feeling better. Encrid can see that Jackson could take out the assassins with no effort, but he could not just bring him along to solve this for him. This was a wall he had to get past on his own. So he decides to think like Jackson would in the same situation. He asks what Jackson would do if someone like him stabbed him from behind. The redhead thinks it over for a quiet moment and answers that he is not sure. Nobody had ever survived his ambushes. Our hero feels the dread hit hard the second those words land. The redhead says Robin needs eyes in the back of his head. He cannot quite figure out what Jackson is trying to say, so he asks the redhead what that actually means. Jackson tells our hero to look at the cart behind him. Rob is caught off guard. The redhead spotted something from that far away. He says something is about to go wrong with that cart. Seconds later, the front wheel drops off and hits the ground. Rob stares and asks if Jackson is some kind of prophet. He just points to his own ear without saying a word, and says he had heard a grinding sound coming from the axle. He says that whoever listens to the battlefield can see what comes next. Our hero is struck by the confidence Jackson carries in his own words. The redhead adds that it is nothing more than training and habit built over time, that with enough time Rob would pick it up and sharpen it himself, and closes by saying the key is tuning the senses and isolating sound. Rob holds his gaze one last time before night comes. The scene shifts and darkness settles over the camp. Our hero lies still with his eyes shut, getting ready. The assassin sends the needle flying through the dark. Encred is locked in, listening to every sound around him. He pushes to catch every detail within range. He picks up the patrol's footsteps and the crackle of the torches. The assassin drops down along the side of the barracks. Our hero tries to pin down the location through sound alone. The assassin touches the ground without making a sound. Robin feels the dread creeping in. He cannot hear the assassin at all. Then the assassin vanishes like a flash step through the dark. The needle drives into our hero's neck without warning. He tenses up. He never felt the assassin coming. And once again, he returns to another empty morning. He is up immediately and moving toward the redhead. Jackson starts laying out more on how to track by sound. Rob listens closely to everything Jackson puts on the table. The redhead snaps his fingers and a sharp tone cuts through the air. He explains that sound is a wave pushing out in every direction. He closes his fist, showing that Encred needs to isolate a single wave, because that is how he would find the exact sound he needs. Rob turns and opens himself up to everything happening around him. He shuts his eyes and focuses on pulling out a single frequency. He counts the flags in the area using his ears alone, tracks which direction the footsteps around him are coming from. He starts to feel the waves of sound moving through the space. Some of them are completely foreign to him, barely there at all. The blondie shows up and cuts the training short with a light smile. He asks what kind of strange training this is supposed to be. Robin looks at him and asks straight, "A nickname?" Krang had already come up with one and was calling him NC. Robin says he must look like an idiot doing this kind of training. Krang shakes his head, says he is no idiot for putting in the time. Robin watches him quietly and takes that in without a word. Night arrives and the needle is already moving through the dark. Once again, Robin cannot get out of the way in time. He looks to the side and watches the assassin finish Krang without hesitation. The assassin pulls the blade slowly out of the blondie's gut. Krang pours blood from the wound. Our hero is furious. This is already the 33rd time he has failed. The assassin moves in toward the cabin again and sticks a completely silent landing inside. And once again, Krang is finished before anyone can do a thing. The scene shifts to Encred training again after failure. He keeps reading the sounds of the space with his eyes closed. Rob eases up and tells himself he just needs to do this naturally. An eagle appears in the distance lining up its landing and comes down onto the roof of the cabin without a sound. It was the exact same silent approach the assassin always used. Our hero suddenly picks up on a presence closing in from ahead. It was the blondie again, right on schedule. He gives a small smile, surprised that Robin had sensed him coming, and realizes Robin has been actively sharpening his perception, and once again tells him he is no idiot for spending time on this. The scene cuts to the assassin getting ready to launch the needle. For the first time, our hero manages to slip the attack and pulls his sword fast without hesitating, and drives a clean horizontal strike straight at the assassin. The assassin hits the ground in shock in front of Encred. He had not seen that coming at all, and Rob finally gets to taste what it feels like not to die. But that victory did not last. The assassin was still on the ground, grinding his teeth, and even so he pushes up and drives a diagonal strike at Encred. Rob reads it immediately. This guy is not much of a fighter. He glances back and vengeance had already gone down, but Krang was still standing with his sword drawn. Meanwhile, the assassin was already loading up a strike with his dagger. Encred keeps his guard up and slips the attack at the last second. Suddenly, the assassin flings one of his blades straight at him. It grazes across his chest and tears right through. Encred staggers from the hit, but the assassin does not stop. Then he picks up on someone closing in from behind. It was the elf commander, the fairy, and without thinking twice, Rob decides to move on her first. The elf raises her sword as Rob charges in, but the assassin snaps and sends a volley of needles flying at everyone. Encred realizes too late, they are already coming straight for him. Krang is frozen with dread as the needles close in. Then suddenly the fairy slips Robin's attack clean and drives forward fast, straight toward the assassin. Encred reads it in an instant. She was never the enemy. He spots the opening and moves in on the assassin. Goes for a thrust directly into his chest. The assassin opens his stance to absorb the hit, but the sword goes flying from the impact. The assassin knows it is over and turns his back on Rob and runs. Encred lets him go and stares into the silence outside. Everyone was already on their feet watching from out there. Krang speaks up and says that guy was probably after him all along. Encred says he knew, and Krang asks how. He says no one hires an assassin for someone truly insignificant. The fairy agrees and adds that he thinks fast. She was holding the scabbard of her sword, still waiting for something. Rob stops for a brief moment, thinking she might come at him next, but Krang steps in front of him and says he has a favor to ask. He says he does not want anyone to die today. Encred stays quiet and just watches the two of them. The fairy bows before Krang and obliges. She says she also has an antidote to bring vengeance back, and Rob picks up on it. She clearly knows her way around antidotes. Krang keeps the conversation going, worried about what happens if someone finds out. Encred says it is fine, as long as there is no trace left behind, and then he decides to share his reckless idea with everyone. Suddenly, the cabin catches fire, and smoke rises from the top. All the soldiers rush over to put out the flames. Meanwhile, Encred stays low, crouched down beside Vengeance, and every trace of the assassin vanished along with the flames. The other soldiers would deal with what came after. Elsewhere in the forest, Krang and the fairy walk together. Krang brings up Robin and asks, "Is he not interesting?" The fairy takes in the question and says nothing, while Krang just keeps walking alongside her in silence. Then the image of Encred raising his sword in the sun comes to her. She keeps walking, quiet and steady, and lets out a faint smile, like Encred had left some kind of mark on her. And then the two of them walk deeper into the forest and disappear. The scene shifts, and a scythe drops into a puddle. It dissolves slowly into nothing. Encred finds himself face to face with the creature again. It says, "You will see him again." He agrees, and says it could happen at any moment now. The next morning arrives like nothing ever happened. The cabin that had burned was nothing but ash and cinders. Rob was already gathering his things. Unfortunately, he had not been wounded, which meant he was going back to battle. The commander turns and asks why Encred saved him. Our hero is caught off guard. The man was actually scolding him for it, but Encred just answers that the two of them are comrades. The commander takes the answer and lets out a quiet sigh. He calls Robin a selfless fool, and right after asks when he is heading back to the squadron. Rob turns and asks if something had happened out there. And Vengeance says there was a rumor going around. The whole base was cursed. The scene cuts to Ragnar, laying into Rem. He shoves the shaggy one hard in the shoulder. Rem grins, the kind of grin that means he wants blood, and suddenly he hoists Ragnar clean off the ground as soldiers scream to get back. Ragnar gets hurled across the area and crashes into a stack of crates. He grabs one of the crates and launches it straight back at Rem. Rem answers with a right cross that lands flush on Ragnar's jaw, then picks up both axes and says he is going to beat Ragnar into the ground. Ragnar does not flinch, says he will split him clean in two. Our hero arrives in the middle of the crowd watching the whole thing. Rob lets out a slow breath with zero patience left. Rem and Ragnar stop cold and stare at Encred in disbelief. Encred jokes that they could not kill him out there, but these two just might. 4 days later, Rob was already back to his routine. Then suddenly he opens his eyes, and there was Jackson standing right in front of him. He had been trying to slip out without waking Encred, but our hero gets up anyway. He was going to train regardless. The redhead gives him credit. Encred had sharpened his hearing fast, and tells him to keep at it because it would pay off someday. The scene shifts to Encred's hand pressed against a tree. He flexes his forearm and pushes hard into the wood. Our hero needed to use every extra moment he had to train, and the sun reflects behind the mountains as he keeps going. A rock said good morning to him. Encred had just finished and looks down to find out why. It was actually the ponytail doing push-ups with a rock on his back. He tosses the rock aside without breaking pace, and Rob has to look straight up just to meet his eyes. The ponytail says his endurance is way too low for someone chasing knighthood, and tells our hero he needs to keep pushing without stopping. He looks up at the ponytail and says he will try, and Auden keeps walking him through his training method without rushing. Suddenly, Rem kicks Ragnar clean out of his bed. He shouts and calls Ragnar a lazy fool. Ragnar starts dragging himself toward his sword without a word, and Rem has no idea what he is even trying to do. Then Ragnar tells the shaggy one to go to hell, and Rem drops straight into his ready stance. The two of them get cut off by Rob asking if they are at it again, while the ponytail muttered under his breath that violence never solved anything. The shaggy one says Ragnar is going to starve them all out, and tells him to go cook right now. Ragnar fires back and tells the shaggy one to go run the squadron, and throws his towel straight at him. Our hero steps in and asks if there is a problem with him. The Shaggy One says the lack of battles is driving him out of his mind, and Rob calls him out, challenges him to a duel on the spot. The sky outside had already gone gray. A sharp blow lands clean on Rob's ribs without warning, and Rem follows through immediately with the axe. Robin's sword bounces hard from the impact of Rem's strike. Our hero breaks into a cold sweat from the hit, then the Shaggy One comes right back in again, and this time Rob manages to parry just in time. He holds his sword firm and does not let go. The Shaggy One stays sharp and watches for the next move. Our hero drives in with a thrust, but Rem slips it by leaning back at the last second, then immediately catches Encrid's sword with the axe, and uses his free hand to lock Encrid completely down. Encrid has nothing left to give in that moment. Rem drives him into the ground with everything he has, and says he expected a lot more, especially after how much he had improved. Encrid leans on his sword and pulls himself back up. He can feel something is different from before, but it is not enough yet, and challenges the Shaggy One again without hesitation. The Shaggy One thinks to himself, this guy still has a long way to go, but lets out a quiet smile anyway, and takes the challenge. Rain starts coming down hard. The two of them look up and see it has already set in. So they decide to head back inside the cabin. The Shaggy One grumbled the whole way, felt like he was coming down with something. Ragnar was already asleep and the ponytail was locked in his usual position. Then Tag shows up out of nowhere complaining about the rain. He is convinced someone actually put a curse on them. Encrid asks what kind of curse he is talking about, and remembers the commander had mentioned something along those lines before. Tag lies down and starts drying himself off without caring much. But Encrid was still standing there, staring out at the rain in silence. He says the higher-ups would not let something like that slide. Tag cannot figure out why he is still standing there watching the rain fall, and Encrid just says he was training his senses. The Shaggy One asks what the hell that is even good for. The redhead says the Shaggy One is smart enough not to understand. And the other two offer to help our hero train. The rain kept falling without letting up. The commanders were gathered around a table, and the elf woman brings up Encrid out of nowhere. The superior dismisses her choice and calls Encrid useless without hesitating. She says Encrid could deliver results no one would ever expect, and says her instincts do not miss. The sun breaks through the sky. The scene shifts to Encrid and the fairy already in conversation, and he asks her straight, why is he being sent to the scouts? The answer did not take long, and Tag was already starting the day asking if Encrid had done something wrong. He wants to know why he specifically was the one chosen. The image of the fairy crosses Encrid's mind without an answer. The Shaggy One appears and asks if he is really going to accept this. He says he can help Encrid get out of it if he wants. Someone could simply go at the superior and end the whole thing. Meanwhile, the ponytail was on his knees praying they would not take Encrid. Ragnar wakes up in the middle of all the commotion without understanding a thing, and asks Encrid if he can go in his place. Our hero says maybe someone else, but not him. The redhead asks exactly what order they gave him, and tells Encrid to pay attention to the shifts in sound around him. The Shaggy One grumbles, thinking he can just reteach Encrid from the ground up. Encrid just closes his eyes and accepts the chaos around him. Outside, our hero was wrapping his arms in silence. Meanwhile, the Shaggy One moves toward the redhead without warning, and the redhead does not hesitate, draws the dagger in the same instant. The two of them are about to go at each other for real, until Rob steps between them and cuts it all short. He tells the Shaggy One to calm down right now. Rem asks if he is out of his mind for getting in the middle, and the redhead says the one who is out of his mind is Rem himself. The scene shifts completely. A group of soldiers moves through dense forest. A soldier picks up on Encrid's presence and stops. Rob looks back at him with a puzzled expression, and the soldier introduces himself as the leader of the scout squadron. Two soldiers start laughing at Encrid without holding back. Andrew gives a faint smile and goes along with them, and then orders everyone to move out along the path. Some tracks are found in the middle of the trail. Andrew studies them and says they are GNU prints, and right after decides they will track it down for food. Our hero reads the situation immediately. This was not a good idea. A soldier with a bow on his back appears behind Robin. He looks at Encrid and introduces himself quickly. Henri comments that this squadron leader is a bit unpleasant, and the two of them keep talking along the way without stopping. The archer says he at least has some basic knowledge of hunting. Night comes and Andrew had absolutely nothing to show for it. Our hero lies there just listening to him complain out loud. Dawn breaks with the sun reflecting across the open sky. The soldiers keep moving, but this time at a much slower pace. Suddenly they hear something stirring in the brush ahead, and then it hits them. This was the location for the recon. A wide field of tall grass opens up before them. The squadron leader gives the order for everyone to advance. Henry is gripped by fear at the thought of entering that brush. Encrid says there is no choice. They have to follow the leader's order. And then the group of soldiers pushes forward into the brush in silence. Andrew moves at the front with a completely serious expression. The archer notices there are no animal tracks anywhere around them, and quickly explains, that means nothing alive has passed through here. Then suddenly a paw descends slowly toward the ground. The creature steps down hard and spreads its claws wide. Encrid already feels the weight of that presence before he even sees it, and then it charges from the side without any warning. He tracks the movement with his eyes alone, and immediately calls out for everyone to get down. Out of nowhere, 2 soldiers are hit by needles. Andrew freezes from the unexpected attack. Meanwhile, enemy soldiers were already closing in through the brush, and then everyone breaks into a run without looking back. 2 more are caught and left behind along the way. The archer is hit by an arrow and goes down. Encrid was the only one still managing to run, but the number of soldiers was more than enough to surround him. Encrid keeps running through the middle of the brush. A soldier aims his crossbow and gets ready to fire. He picks up the arrow closing in from behind, and manages to dodge because he had heard it just in time. Our hero stops for a second and takes in everything around him, but realizes that in the middle of all that noise he cannot identify anyone. Suddenly, several arrows are fired straight at him, and they hit dead on without giving him a single chance to react. After dying, he tries to warn Andrew about everything, but as expected, nobody believes a single word he says. The afternoon arrives and the ambush begins again, just like before. And once again, Encrid and the archer are hit without mercy. The soldiers fire at Encrid without stopping, and he is caught by around 20 arrows all at once. On the next attempt, he is attacked and surrounded by several soldiers. Lying on the ground, he squeezes the dirt hard in his fist. He was nearly dead, flat on the ground, completely taken over by rage. He notices then how the soldiers' uniforms are painted green for camouflage. Encrid tries to drag himself across the ground through the tall brush and finds a bonfire with several burned flags scattered around it. He sighs looking toward those tents and suddenly gets stabbed from behind and falls for the last time in that attempt. The routine returns, and Andrew is already shouting like always. Encrid was just thinking about how he was going to get out of this. He thinks that group was hiding something important. He considers giving up for a moment, but decides he will not run from this wall. The squadron leader shouts for him to return to his post immediately. One of the soldiers tries to calm Encrid down since Andrew was far too difficult. But Encrid says there is a limit to the nonsense he can take from an idiot. The soldier just stands there with a dumb look on his face. And right after Encrid moves him out of the way without any ceremony, he walks straight up to Andrew and says he would bring the orders to the squadron himself. And Andrew clearly does not like that one bit. The others are impressed by Encrid's nerve. Then Andrew challenges him to a duel on the spot without thinking twice, and the squadron leader drops into his combat stance. Encrid begins to read Andrew's background in silence. Maybe he was a noble or something along those lines, but he could not keep following his orders no matter what. And then the leader shouts and charges with everything he has. Our hero was completely unarmed in front of him. The leader drives a frontal thrust straight at Rob, and Rob gets ready to take the blow without flinching. He blocks with the palm of his hand, and Andrew's guard opens completely. It was too late for him to reset his stance. And then Rob drives a sharp elbow strike straight into his chest. Andrew feels the blow. It was too heavy to take, and drops to his knees in front of Rob from just that single strike. The other soldiers are stunned by what they just witnessed, and from that moment forward, Encrid was responsible for the entire squadron. The archer watches him with a quiet suspicion and says nothing. The Scarface just stays silent and takes it all in, and Andrew lets out a quiet breath, but does not open his mouth. The afternoon arrives and the soldiers keep moving through the brush. The soldiers were a little lost under Rob's new lead. Encrid suddenly asks what the archer's dream is. Henry asks why he wants to know that right now, and then answers that he wants to marry a beautiful woman who works at a flower shop. Encrid asks the same question to the next soldier. He answers that he wants to see his son be born. The others say they want to open their own business, and one just wants to go back home. Andrew says he would fulfill his mother's last wish. His mission was to revive the House of Gardner. Encrid says all of them should stay alive to see their dreams through, and then states with firm resolve, everyone is walking out of here alive. The squadron looks at him with determination in their eyes, and Andrew was now completely driven by what he had just heard. Encrid orders Henry to fire an arrow at head height, and then the arrow cuts through the air toward the brush, and connects directly with the head of one of the enemy soldiers. Everyone is startled by the soldiers surrounding them. Rob orders Andrew to cover his back, and then sprints forward without hesitating. The soldiers look back and catch someone closing in fast. Our hero drives a thrust into the back of one of them, and repositions himself in the middle of the brush ready for the next. 2 more soldiers appear asking what happened, but Andrew grabs one of them from behind before he can react. A soldier attacks Andrew with a spear, but he picks up on it before it is too late. Meanwhile, Rob kept hitting the others without stopping. The other soldiers keep pushing toward the squadron. The whole squadron repositions and faces them ready. And then, our hero orders everyone to attack at once. The chaos erupts, and the sound of clashing swords echoes everywhere. Suddenly, a panther moves silently through the brush. One of the soldiers picks up on its presence and stops. It stares back at him without pulling away for even an instant. And then the soldier decides to attack it without thinking, but Encred shields him before the strike lands. He realizes the soldiers had been chasing that panther, and that this time they had not noticed the squadron because of it. The rest of the squadron had already finished the job meanwhile, and then Encred decides to keep moving without looking back. The panther just watches him walk away in silence. After that battle, 6 of the squadron remained. A soldier was standing alone in the middle of the brush keeping watch, and then Encred takes him out quickly before he even notices. The squadron stays out of crossbow range for 1 day and keeps cutting down the number of enemy soldiers along the way. Andrew attacks a soldier who was standing in the middle of the path, but it was not necessary. They only needed to find the way out. Our hero orders everyone to keep pushing deeper into the brush. Scarface thinks that is completely out of his mind. The others just watch the tension rising between the two. Then Scarface confronts him with a sword to his neck. He says he has no intention of marching toward his own death. Encred then tells him he should know there is no going back. They had made too much noise and the way back would be packed with enemies. And then he grips Scarface's hand firmly and says he also wants to survive, and that they will. Andrew had thought Encred would be a worthless squadron leader, just like his father who had given up and burned through all his fortune. But then he realizes he was completely wrong. In truth, Encred reminded him of his mother. In a flashback, his mother was lying in bed talking to him, and said she hoped he would become a good leader. Andrew stares at her with a heavy heart. The scene returns to Encred telling him to trust him. And then Andrew, in the middle of the whole squadron, says he trusts him, and for the first time calls him captain. Scarface asks why that all of a sudden, and Andrew says Encred is the captain now. Plain and simple. Thor just stares at him with a look that had shifted deep inside. Rob orders everyone to stay crouched until the signal, and then everyone follows him low to the ground without making a sound. Night was already settling over the brush. Everyone was ready in the middle of the growing darkness. Suddenly, footsteps are heard coming from inside the brush. They were soldiers' footsteps, a lot of soldiers. Spears could be seen rising above the brush, countless of them. The archer and another soldier are already gripped by fear. Thor and Andrew just cover Rob's back in silence. The sun was already going down below the tree line. The squadron stayed crouched without moving a single muscle. And suddenly the soldiers pass right in front of the whole squadron, but do not pick up on anyone's presence there. Andrew and Thor were sweating cold without blinking. Rob was tense, holding his breath with everything he had. The soldiers had passed without noticing them, and the whole squadron lets out a breath of relief at the same time. Robin carefully reads the final step. The sun sets, and darkness falls over everything. After some time walking, they arrive at the enemy base. The archer is completely stunned by the sight of it. The whole squadron was inside the enemy camp. Robin kept planning something in silence. The wind beat against the burned flags around them, and there were bones hanging that looked like they came from animals. And then Encred orders everyone to follow him, and the whole squadron follows in position and in complete silence. They hide behind a tent without making a sound. And then Encred asks the soldier with the scar across his eye for his name. He says to call him Mac, and right after Encred warns him that he will not tolerate any disobedience from Mac, Andrew immediately tells Mac to shut his mouth and follows Encred right behind him without questioning. Mac is forced to fall in with the rest. The clouds were covering the moon in the sky that night. The scene shifts to Robin slicing a tent clean in half. Mac breaks into a cold sweat at that bold move. And then the whole squadron steps into the empty tent and keeps pushing forward through the camp. Encred keeps moving through the enemy camp without rushing, and Mac finds all that confidence he carried strange. The front of the camp looked completely empty, but after a few steps they run into soldiers in the way. Our hero orders everyone to hold right there without moving. He remembered the last time he had infiltrated that place. All the soldiers had stabbed him because he touched the flag. Rob states that the main objective is to protect that flag. The flag was positioned in the middle of a bonfire. It looked like some kind of ritual. Mac wonders how he knew that flag was there, and figures maybe the company commander had told him. Our hero cuts Mac's thought short. The soldiers would be too busy guarding the flag, and looks straight at him without blinking, and says everyone will escape while that is happening. Right after that, he orders the squadron to split into 2 groups. Mac says he will take the decoy group without hesitating. Rob finds that strange. He had agreed too easily. And then Mac moves forward toward the decoy group. Suddenly, a soldier takes a rock to the head. Mac runs through the middle of the camp, drawing everyone's attention, and every soldier in the camp goes after him at the same time. Meanwhile, our hero takes the opening and grabs one of the camp's torches with a firm grip. Suddenly, a massive soldier appears from behind him and slices the tip of the torch clean off in one stroke. Encred is already gripped by fear in that instant and then drops into his battle stance. It was the first time he had seen that soldier across all his previous deaths. The soldier stares at him with a completely bloodthirsty look. Suddenly, something happens behind the soldier. One of the camp's tents starts to catch fire. The other soldiers shout warning that the camp is in flames. Andrew and the other soldier were sprinting to the back of the camp. The soldier orders them to put the fire out before attacking anything. Encred plants his foot hard on the ground and positions his sword for the strike, and then drives the thrust directly toward the soldier's head. But Rob is stunned by what he sees. The soldier had pulled off a perfect dodge even with his back turned. And Encred loses his footing completely and ends up with his back to him. His heart jumps into his throat with no idea what to do, and suddenly a wound opens across his stomach. His stance had been broken by that precise strike. He looks back, and the soldier looks back at him and calls him weak as he walks slowly toward Rob. Our hero begins to think about how many times he died to get here. There were countless failed ambushes in the middle of that brush. There were endless deaths before he finally made it this far. But then he realizes this was the real wall. The scene shifts, and the soldier is positioned with the wall right behind him. Encred pulls his hand from the wound and tries to reset, grips the sword and brings his stance back up. The soldier starts to sense something in that moment and asks with contempt if Robin is actually smiling. Encred lifts his stance and tells the soldier he is going to finish him. Then the soldier steps in with a heavy horizontal strike. Encred ducks and positions the sword behind his shoulder and brings it up with a full vertical strike using everything he has. Both swords clash and throw off sparks, and the soldier had stopped Encred's strike cold. Suddenly, he tries a direct vertical attack, and Encred barely slips it. Then the soldier attacks from a completely unexpected angle. The sword comes straight toward his face. Rob manages to parry the blow with difficulty and starts sweating cold as he stares the soldier down. The soldier stares back with that bloodthirsty look. Encred tries to attack again, but the soldier lands a precise parry. Then Encred decides to throw a dagger without warning. The soldier simply extends his hand and deflects the dagger off to the side with ease and drives forward again at Encred with a fast thrust to the chest. Meanwhile, the fire was spreading across the entire camp. The soldier's sword had passed very close to his head, and the two of them begin to notice the flames were spreading fast. It was heading straight for the flag. Then a hooded figure shouts from behind the commander, saying he did not understand what was at stake there. And then the hooded figure looks back at Encred, who was positioned and ready to keep fighting. The soldier then wishes him until next time, and turns his back, and starts giving orders to the soldiers around him. But Encred is not satisfied with that. He grips his sword tight and decides to push forward, but is cut off by Andrew, who calls him by name. He says they need to go right now. No discussion. Encred is still staring hard at that soldier through the flames, and the soldier stares back without blinking. Then Encred sheathes his sword and calls the retreat, and the camp soldiers kept putting out the flames as the squadron sprinted toward the brush. Only 5 members of the squadron remained. Andrew shouts that they might follow them through the brush, and Encred just answers that they probably will not. Suddenly, the archer feels his strength leaving his body, and enemy soldiers were closing in along the path. Then the whole squadron repositions to defend him. Encred takes down one of the soldiers without hesitating. Mac drives into another soldier straight in the chest, and Andrew cuts the throat of one more in the same instant, and Encred orders them not to stop, to keep running. One of the squadron members says they should head toward the field habitat, but the archer knew a safe route through there, and then our hero decides to trust him without question. The moon was descending through the dark forest. The whole squadron moved through it in silence. A fox appears and watches them pass without moving. They keep pushing forward as the archer leads the way. Encred covers his face with his hand from the arriving sun. Dawn was already breaking and the sun was climbing between the mountains. The squadron was running across open ground. A soldier spots them coming from far away. Andrew and the archer had arrived out of breath but alive. Encred breathes deep with a heavy relief inside. Everyone was completely drained, but they had made it. The scene shifts to the completely burned flag. The hooded figure stared at the ground in absolute silence, and standing across from him, the gray hound stared back without saying a word, and then he looks again at the burned flags around him. The scene shifts to the banner of a gray hound, and right after to a wolf on top of a mountain under a red moon. The scene returns to the commander talking with the soldier. It was the platoon commander, and they were talking about Encred, and the commander repeats firmly that this would not happen again. The scene shifts to Encred wrapping his fists. He still wanted to keep fighting that soldier. He was not done yet. The scene shifts to the soldier saying he would kill him with his own hands, and Encred answering that he would surpass him. The shaggy one was lying in bed in silence. He grabs the axe that was in the air and sits up, and wonders if Encred had died. It would not be surprising. After all, he was a rookie. Suddenly, Ragnar wakes up right across from the shaggy one, and asks what the shaggy one is staring at like that. Rem just raises his middle finger at him without a word, and Ragnar raises the middle finger of his own foot right back. Rem lets out a quiet smile, and then says he wants to kill him, and Ragnar calls him a crazy bastard without blinking. Meanwhile, Encred was giving the debrief on the last mission, and then bows to the fairy and takes his leave. She had not expected Encred to bring back results that good. Encred was heading toward the exit when Andrew comes up and speaks to him, and thanks him for being alive because of him, and asks if he would ever cross paths with Encred again. And our hero answers, only if the roads cross, and then leaves the squadron behind and walks away. Andrew is the first to bow to him, and right after the whole squadron bows together. Rob kept walking, wondering if that was really his best. The scene shifts to the sun reflecting across the camp, and Rob decides he needs to push past himself to reach his goal. Suddenly, the thought is broken by several people shouting around him. The scene shifts to Ragnar and the Shaggy One fighting. Rem had a bloodthirsty look burning in his eyes, and Ragnar stared back with the exact same eyes. Encred had never seen those expressions on them before. A soldier beside Encred says they did not even look human. They looked like animals, and the two keep fighting without giving a single step back. Then Encred grips his sword firm and watches everything, and decides he wants them to look at him like that someday too. The sword and the axe clash hard between the two of them. Suddenly, Ragnar glances to the side and notices something, and the two stop the fight at the same time. Then the Shaggy One lets out a shout that sends every soldier running. Encred asks about the way Rem had blocked Ragnar's attack, and asks Ragnar about his own strike from just now as well. Ragnar asks why he wants to know that right now, and Rob just asks again without backing down. And then Ragnar turns his back and says, "It was nothing." The scene shifts to some soldiers rotating positions in the camp. During the journey, Rob's wounds had healed well. Tag asks where he is heading off like that. Meanwhile, Ragnar and the Shaggy One were just eating soup in silence. Morning comes on another day. Ragnar was too lazy to get up and just stared at the ceiling until he notices Encred was no longer there. He gets up and stretches out slowly, then picks up his sword and drags it toward the exit, and kept yawning the whole way without any rush. Suddenly, someone plants their foot hard on the ground outside. Encred was out there training his strikes alone. As he swings, he feels the rib and drops to his knees. He was breathing hard with both hands in the dirt. Ragnar watched and says he had learned the wrong fundamentals, and that getting stronger was impossible with that kind of training. Our hero picks the sword back up without saying a word. Ragnar wonders why he still pushes himself that hard. Rob lifts the sword, loading up a strike, and Ragnar cuts him off. He asks why he keeps insisting like this. He simply says he wants to get stronger, and Ragnar asks what he would do if he got stronger. Rob answers that he wants to become a knight, and explains it is not just about being a knight. He grips the sword and answers that it is also about honor, and lifts it, saying it is for the sick and the poor, and for those he loves. Ragnar just watches him speak without cutting in. He closes his eyes. In his mind, strength was only a tool. Ragnar picks up his sword and rests it on his shoulder, and starts walking toward Encred, who still had his back turned training. Encred looks back, and Ragnar asks if he wants to learn how to really use a sword. Ragnar asks Encred if he wants to learn the art of the sword. Our hero answers yes with a firm and determined look. Inside, Ragnar hesitates. It would be a lot of work, but there was something about that boy that sparked his curiosity. He asks if the Shaggy One had taught him anything. Encred answers yes, the heart of the beast. Ragnar thinks on it for a moment and says that is good, and so are his thrusts. Then declares he must forget everything else he has learned. Everything except those two things. Our hero frowns and asks if that includes the mercenary sword technique. Ragnar says especially that. Explains that keeping that technique will build bad habits, and that once he starts making the same mistakes over and over, the chances of giving up grow fast. Then puts the choice in his hands: start from scratch or stay exactly where he is. Before he even finishes the sentence, our hero cuts him off and says he will start from scratch. Ragnar looks visibly impressed and asks if he was being serious. Our hero, without hesitating, asks where they should begin. Ragnar thinks to himself that this kid was definitely not normal. He notices he has a solid build and that a long sword would suit him well, and proposes they swap weapons. Our hero finds it strange and asks if there is no problem just handing the sword over like that. Ragnar answers it does not matter. There is nothing special about it, and instructs him to place his right hand above his left on the grip. Our hero grips the weapon hard. Ragnar notices and asks why he is squeezing so tight. He answers that it is so he does not lose the sword. Ragnar asks who taught him that. When he hears it was the Shaggy One, he mutters a curse under his breath and tells our hero to get into position, then drives a full-force vertical strike straight down. Our hero manages to block, but his hands tremble violently from the impact. He asks in a daze what that was. His hands were in pain. Ragnar answers that was exactly what was supposed to happen, explains that if he stays rigid, he will end up breaking the sword, and says bluntly that our hero is behaving like a dry branch or a stone pillar. Our hero does not follow the analogy and complains that his companions have a terrible way of explaining things. Encrid thinks quietly to himself, trying to figure out what it could mean. Did he need to be more flexible? Or was it the way he gripped the sword that was slowing him down? While the sun blazed hard across the sky, our hero takes a kick to the leg. Ragnar, without stopping, orders him not to lose his footing, and fires questions while mocking him, asking if he is fighting or dancing. Our hero hits the ground but keeps his grip on the sword. Ragnar watches him with a serious expression, thinking he had no idea how unprepared he was, barely able to pull off the basics. That kind of thing was not something easily taught. Even so, our hero gets back up, determined, grips the sword again with firm hands. Ragnar watches him for a moment and then tells him to take it easy. Suddenly, the Shaggy One walks up, asking in a mocking tone where they had been all day, and jokes whether they were out having a picnic. He asks Encrid if the other one had been giving him trouble, and offers with a provoking grin to sort him out, and leans into Ragnar's shoulder. Ragnar fires back that he will rip his hands off. Then, looking at how the Shaggy One was dressed, he asks with a serious tone if something had happened. The answer comes straight. They had been summoned. Enemy forces were on the horizon. The scene cuts to the allies preparing for battle, adjusting armor and gripping weapons as the forces gather. Ragnar wonders inside if it was a mistake to hand the sword to our hero. He was still too raw with the new technique and might not hold up in battle. Even so, he thinks with firm resolve that if it comes to it, he will babysit the kid himself. Meanwhile, our hero cannot stop thinking about the technique he had barely started to learn. There was something in it he wanted to master. Someone asks why they are standing there like that. The scene cuts to a flag being shaken by the wind. The enemy formation seen from a distance is strange, uneven, as if there was a hidden intention behind it. Suddenly, an old man with a suspicious look tells everyone to witness an end, and out of nowhere, a thick fog starts spreading across the battlefield. Encrid frowns. Could this be some kind of magic? The troops fall into chaos. Our hero thinks to himself that that fog came from absolutely nowhere, and that he can no longer see who is standing beside him. Everyone asks in confusion where it came from. Suddenly, our hero goes on high alert. A sound, something cutting through the air. Before anyone can react, he shouts, "Arrows!" A volley of projectiles crashes down on the troops. Many are hit. The fairy manages to deflect most of them, but her mind races. That is not ordinary fog. There was no way to predict the enemy would use something like this. She orders everyone to raise their shields, and thinks that if they do not act fast, they may have already lost before the fight even started. The scene cuts to the old man letting out a sinister laugh. He explains it was hard to make the magic work because of the requirements. It blinds everyone except those positioned below the point where the magic was cast. In other words, those under the flags. So he concludes with a cold certainty. The battle is already over. He calls the magic the fog of annihilation. A familiar voice rises behind him, commenting in an ironic tone that he seems pleased with himself. The old man answers, of course. He barely managed to make it work, especially with the flag nearly burned to nothing. He curses the situation, saying that if not for that, it would have been so much easier. The scene cuts to the knight, the one who had crossed swords with our hero before. He appears with a look of contempt on his face. Our hero once again dodges a volley of arrows. The Shaggy One shouts for him to get his head down. Another voice says it is a spell and curses. Encrid thinks that voice is Rem's. He quickly realizes Rem is right in front of him but cannot identify him just by looking, and thinks he cannot fight like this. Suddenly an arrow hits between his legs. His breathing gets heavy and he starts to tense up. He thinks to himself, my legs will not move right. There is no way I can use anything Ragnar taught me like this. He says he did not expect to get it on the first try, and remembers what Ragnar told him and thinks it was all true. He would probably die in this battle. Ragnar then tells him to stay behind him, but Encrid says he found a way. He thinks, if I cannot do it in one try, and breaks into a run. Everyone thinks he has lost his mind and shouts for him not to go. Suddenly a spear appears through the middle of the fog, and he is stabbed directly in the throat. He thinks to himself, at least with this he can learn more from Ragnar. The enemy soldier thinks he is out of his mind. Once again, waking up the day before, he thinks to himself that Ragnar is not a good teacher, and says he is a genius. The words might sound wrong because for him, everything comes naturally. Encrid then, to confirm what he suspects, asks where the center of gravity should be. Ragnar cannot quite say for certain, and tries to explain more or less how it should feel. Encrid then has no doubt about what he thought, but thinks to himself that observing and listening are among his strongest points. Suddenly, once again, a volley of arrows comes in from the front. Someone shouts. Our hero manages to block some of them, but still thinks he is too rigid. Another arrow appears right in front of his face, and he thinks it is fine to keep dying and keep learning. Once again, he comes back and continues learning with Ragnar. On his 31st try, he manages to move more fluidly. Ragnar says that step was good and asks where he learned it and says he should already be able to start learning the basics. He goes on to say the 3 basic attacks of a sword are cut, thrust, and slash. As he swings the sword, he says to use the tip of the blade to defend, and that if the sword is high quality, the sides can be used as well. Then he points the sword at Encred and says the shortest distance between you and your opponent is called the attack line. To put it simply, the use of the sword is all about blocking your opponent's attack line while opening your own. You need to picture your opponent in your head and reach them with the sword. Once again, a soldier aims at his neck with a spear, but this time our hero manages to dodge and says his feet feel lighter. Now he can dodge with ease. But then another formation of spears appears aimed directly at his chest. Our hero thinks, little by little my today is starting to change. Once again, the next day he is training with Ragnar, and this time he manages to block the attack. Ragnar, surprised, asks if he saw the sword coming, and once again the cycle repeats, death and training. He thinks to himself that his progress is steady with every repetition. On his 100th day, he manages to parry one of Ragnar's attacks. Ragnar is completely stunned and asks, "Who are you?" The intensity in his eyes shifts entirely, and he no longer looks at Encred the same way. Once again, in the middle of the fog on the battlefield, he thinks to himself that he used to believe he could not improve any further because of his talent. Ragnar watches him with concern, but he pushes forward bravely into the attack line, dodges a spear, and says his final goal is the path to becoming a knight. Dies once more, and says, there is something beyond this pain. While thinking, this is fun, so fun it could drive him mad. Another day and Ragnar comes to him and asks if he wants to learn the art of the sword, and he thinks, if I can get stronger, of course I will. I will die as many times as it takes. Ragnar then thinks, there is no way you are this good. Squadron leader, you are coming back on purpose. While Encred considers it, Ragnar says it is not quite that, but says he has a solid foundation, and if anything, what he lacks is experience. Once again, with a volley of arrows, he thinks he has already repeated this same day over 200 times. As an arrow appears in front of his eyes, he takes a low step and thinks, I will see how far the techniques I have learned will take me. He dodges a spear and drives a strike into an enemy soldier's neck. He knows this because he knows one of the enemies will appear behind the fog, and he can finish each of them even without being able to see them. An enemy soldier freezes in shock and says, there is nobody here, and suddenly his leg is cut. The rest ask what is happening as they shout to watch the ground. The scene cuts to Ragnar saying, remember, eyes, feet, and hands. Observe with your eyes, anticipate, move with your feet, and finish with your hands. Our hero then lets out a dark smile and says, it is different. The feeling is completely different compared to when I had no idea what the principles even were. They are all coming at him. He pushes forward, and they say he made it this far. But if he thinks he is getting out alive, he is very wrong. Then he says, let us fight with our swords like men, and thinks to himself that he wants to keep testing himself. The enemy soldier in return curses him, and our hero takes a volley of crossbow bolts. Once again, they are in that space, and the ferryman entity says that every mortal who walked into their own grave must have lost their mind. Waking up the next day, he thinks, he only showed up to insult me, then asks if Encred has his head in the clouds. Encred remembers the Shaggy One saying it was a spell back on the battlefield, and remembers the enemy formation that was very strange. To make sure of his suspicion, he asks the Shaggy One if he knows anything about spells. The Shaggy One is surprised and asks why. Our hero says he just thinks it would be interesting, and tells him to say what he knows. Rem then says it could be, and asks if our hero knows the difference between magic and spells. Our hero answers uncertainly that magic is more common. The Shaggy One says that is not wrong, but goes on to say that spells need a medium, and that the medium is far more important. Spells cannot exist without one. Encred then says, that is it. The flag is the medium of the spell, and thinks to himself that if he destroys the flag, the fog will dissolve. He then asks if the Shaggy One's tribe use spells. Since spellcasters come from the west and the Shaggy One is from the western frontier, the Shaggy One says there are not many true spellcasters, and that most of them are actually sorcerers. Then asks where Encred is going, and he says, to train. The scene cuts to Ragnar. He says that luckily they both share the same basic training, and asks if Encred knows the Oniak sword technique, then tells a story. About 500 years ago, there was a prodigy, a child born on a sword farm who killed 12 bandits, who attacked the farm with nothing but a fire poker. Having lost his parents early, he learned the sword arts very young. a noble who had heard the rumors took him in, and that prodigy came to be known as Leonesis Oniak, but he was as cursed as he was gifted, for he began losing his strength at the age of 10 and was completely paralyzed by 12 and then faded from history. Ragnar then says that even completely paralyzed Leonesis made himself immortal in history. He compiled every sword technique in the land and categorized them into 5 kinds: the elaborate and precise sword art, the strong and heavy sword art, the fluid and disorienting sword art, the fast and relentless sword art, the gentle and deflecting sword art. With those achievements, the Oniak family became the greatest house in the empire, and the foundations of their techniques can still be felt in the sword today. Ragnar then says that every technique Encred has learned has roots in the heavy sword, and says he will teach him something more advanced than the heart of the beast taught by the Shaggy One. Then says, concentrate, forget everything around you, and focus only on your own sword and the enemies of it. Says he will show him how it feels, and launches an extremely fast attack that Encred cannot dodge, cutting across his neck. Encred says, a little faster than the Shaggy One's axe. I almost died, then asks if he felt anything. Suddenly the Shaggy One appears. You degenerate. You are trying to kill the squadron leader. Ragnar says people concentrate better when they are close to death, and says he is only helping. The Shaggy One says Encred will not learn anything that way, because he took a very long time to learn the heart of the beast himself. Ragnar then provokes him, saying he would not learn anything easily from a stupid barbarian. While the two begin to argue, Encred says both of them are terrible at teaching. One says the other is from the far north and that his people are more barbaric than anything. The other says he is from the barbarian tribes of the south. Rem says, fine. On your grave it will say, I lost my head to a barbarian from the south. Encred then cuts in, saying he is here because of the retreat order. Ragnar then tells him to always stay sharp in the moments just before death. Once again, out on the battlefield, our hero thinks it is similar to the heart of the beast, but still completely different. The heart of the beast makes you lose yourself in the face of death, but focusing on a single point keeps you sharp, and says he needs more experience to recalibrate, while thinking to himself, if the flag is the medium, I just need to destroy it. Once again, the fog rises, and our hero thinks that this time he will set a goal above gaining experience: destroy the flag. He thinks to himself that it will be easy to get there with the Shaggy One and Ragnar, but first he will try alone until he cannot anymore, while being stabbed in the throat. Our hero thinks that focusing on a single point is very useful, and says he died many times while unprepared. To survive the assassins, he trained his hearing. To survive the battlefield, he learned the heart of the beast to concentrate. The scene cuts to Ragnar asking if he understood, and saying he should be able to feel the tip of the blade slowing down. Our hero thinks he understood nothing, and wonders if the boldness of the heart of the beast is interfering with it, but considers that probably is not it. Ragnar then says he should feel everything around him disappear, everything except the opponent's sword, and asks if he really felt nothing. Encred thinks to himself that channeling his fear of death might not be the right thing to do, and asks how Ragnar learned this. But he says he always knew how to do it, and says it is in the name. Just focus on a single point. Our hero then says he got no useful answer from that, and will have to figure it out on his own. He thinks to himself that he must not get impatient, and that his priority should be destroying the flag while continuing to practice. Our hero shouts, "Everyone get down," and shouts for them to raise their shields. This time, everyone manages to defend against the volley of arrows, then says he has repeated this same day 300 times, and knows where the attacks will come from with his eyes closed. He then stabs an enemy soldier in the neck from behind. All the enemy soldiers around him curse at him and shout to catch him. Our hero keeps pushing through everyone along the enemy defense line. An enemy soldier shouts to stop him and to hold their positions. Our hero, with a dark grin, keeps moving forward, and then manages to destroy the flag, and says it took him 10 days to reach the flag, but the fog does not clear. Our hero is confused. He was certain he had destroyed the flag. Suddenly, he is impaled by several spears. One of the enemy soldiers says he knows a little about spells, but got it wrong. He then thinks to himself, there is only one real flag. The others are just decoys, and he needs to find the real one among them. Once again, the next day, same battlefield. He pushes through everyone and says he has a 1 in 5 chance of getting it right. On the next try, he shouts for everyone to get down, but nobody hears him. The result, only he manages to defend against the volley of arrows. He thinks, why did they not hear him this time? And considers whether it was the timing or if he needs to let them recover first. He then manages to destroy the second flag. After passing through 3 days, it was another copy. 4 still remained. This time he spends 5 days reaching the third flag. Another copy. The fourth flag took him 7 days. Another fake. Suddenly only 2 flags remained, and he wondered which of them was real. If he had to guess, it would be the one furthest away. The day repeats. The fog is there once again. He shouts for everyone to get down and raise their shields. The arrows come. This time, our hero tells the Shaggy One to follow behind him. The Shaggy One, surprised, asks if he has lost his mind. But all Encred thinks about is that he must not tire himself out before reaching the flag. The Shaggy One then drives his axe into an enemy soldier, and our hero pushes forward, drawing the enemy's attention, and uses the opening to push through them. The Shaggy One then asks the soldier on the verge of death who cast the spell. When he is sure they will not answer, he moves on to the next, expecting that one to talk. While our hero pushes forward, he thinks that the equivalent of a full year has passed, repeating the same day. He then loads up a horizontal strike aimed at the flag, but is cut off. A familiar face appears. He says that God answered his prayers because he truly wanted to kill our hero with his own hands. Our hero in return asks, "Who are you?" He then says, "You forgot about me in these few days that passed?" And our hero is left confused. Encred asks awkwardly, "Who are you?" And he answers with suspicion, "You will remember when I cut you," and advances. Encred slips it and the sword passes, then takes a fast step forward and drives in with the sword. The enemy soldier is surprised and asks if this is the same guy he saw before, and says he got incomparably better. But what was surprise turns into indignation, and he asks himself if he is actually trying to reach him in just one step. Our hero advances this time with a vertical attack that is blocked. The swords clash hard against each other. Our hero manages to identify the fluid sword art through the way the attacks are deflected. With every second that passes, the fight grows more intense. Encred thinks he needs to focus every one of his senses on what is in front of him, because if he gets distracted for even a moment, the balance will collapse, and says he has to give everything he has. The flag does not matter anymore. Everything around me disappears. All that is left is the sword, and once again they collide. Our hero is stabbed in the chest. He spits blood and says with conviction, "I remember you. You were guarding the flagpole out on the field, right?" Then he says his name, Mitch Hurrier, commander of the platoon of the Greyhound Squadron of the Principality of Aspen. Our hero then introduces himself. "I am the commander of the squadron of the Kingdom of Naulilia." Encred, an enemy soldier, appears and asks, "Is he the enemy?" The commander says, "Yes, he is a specialist at staying hidden." His subordinate says he looks harmless. Mitch then asks why he is smiling. Our hero thinks to himself, "Ragnar, you were wrong. It was not concentration born from fear in the moment of death that I needed. What I needed was a good rival, an opponent who would risk everything and give everything to fight and push me forward." Mitch, confused, asks if he is just a madman. The scene cuts to Ragnar saying that focusing on a single point is similar to the tension of when you are dying. Encred says, "I understand now." Ragnar asks why then he looks like he is not listening. Has he already given up? The Shaggy One appears once more saying they have been called to regroup, and Encred calls out to Ragnar. Ragnar is confused because now he seems more fired up than before, which he finds genuinely strange, and wonders if he should push the warm-up a little harder today. The fog rises once more. Encred shouts, "Everyone get down! Shields! The arrows come!" Once again he asks the Shaggy One to come with him, and this time Ragnar follows alongside the Shaggy One. The two curse each other quickly and keep moving, while fighting fiercely. Our hero, upon finding Mitch, this time says, "Good to see you, friend," and calls him into the fight. Mitch asks if he came looking for him, and our hero says, "Do you have a problem with someone confessing because it was love at first sight?" Mitch fires back. If the squadron are the Greyhounds, then the lovers are persistent, and says it is the first time anyone has ever come looking for him. Encred asks if he is upset about it. He says not at all, and the fight begins. Our hero tries to enter the state of concentration to feel the sword, but is stabbed in the chest once more. Mitch then says with disappointment that he did not think he would lose so easily, and that he thought something was going to happen coming at him like that. Encred then thinks his approach was wrong. It cannot be intentional. He needs to be drawn into the fight naturally, and he repeats the day to find that feeling. On the nth time, he managed to see the tip of the sword again. On the 28th time, he learned to enter the state of concentration intentionally. On the 48th time, he managed to see Ragnar's sword and dodge it. Ragnar is completely stunned and asks how. Our hero thinks internally, pure concentration. It means controlling your body and the sword completely, and thinks about how far he has come before repeating this day, and says, "This time, it is finally time to surpass this today."